Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is The Murder of Cleopatra, Part 6. It's called Actium 2, Final Attempt to Flee Egypt. Welcome to my 10-part series on the murder of Cleopatra and my attempt to fight against what I see as atrocities in these documentaries on Cleopatra, especially the Netflix documentary called Queen Cleopatra. Um, in history, it appears that the ancient quote historians slash storytellers like Plutarch, who wrote about Cleopatra, there whatever has been said has been taken kind of literally, and by many historians throughout 2,000 years, and the same story has been told over and over without actually looking at the facts. And this is why I wrote this book, The Murder of Cleopatra. In 2004, I did the Mysterious Death of Cleopatra. It's a discovery documentary. I went to Egypt and I got rid of the snake, essentially, because the story of the cobra and Cleopatra committing suicide that way was quite ridiculous. So I did get rid of the snake, and since then the snake has disappeared from pretty much everywhere. Even Netflix doesn't have a snake killing Cleopatra. But the suicide story continues, and I believe it was not suicide, it was murder. All right, but so much of the history is, I think, completely off. So where did I leave you all last time in part 5? Part 5 was probably a little confusing to people because it was so hard to, in a short series, I'm doing this as short pieces, because there's a lot in this book, a tremendous amount of evidence that I refer to in this book, and a lot of writings and a lot of explanations. So again, I would suggest you actually read the book because that will help you understand all of that. And the link to the book is below. It's on Amazon. So, but I'm going to try to do this in a short version so you can sort of understand where I'm going. And so I'm going to continue with, in part 6, how Cleopatra was planning to get out of Egypt. She hasn't given up entirely yet. She has not. She has still got one ace up her sleeve, essentially. Maybe it's not even an ace. Maybe it's just maybe it's just a 10. But she's stuck. She is stuck in Egypt right now. Octavian is coming after her. Ever since she and Antony lost the Battle of Actium, it's been a matter of how long it's going to take for Octavian, the winner, to come and do us in, because he's going to have the strength of Rome behind him. And after he won in Actium, he got other associated regions nearby, other countries or dominions of sorts under Roman control, more so on his side than Antony. So he was gathering strength. What Cleopatra had to hope was that he was going to kick off, die, get assassinated, whatever, and stop his progress toward Egypt. However, she wasn't lucky at Actium, and she's not lucky in Octavian not coming her direction. So last time, what I talked about was that first she tried to escape Egypt. Let me show you the map again, so this is clear. Hold on a second. Well, let me show this first. All right. So yes, Actium 2, the final attempt to flee Egypt. Just want you to pay attention. That's what the topic is about. And you're going to wonder why I say Actium 2. There was only one Actium, right? Well, yes, that's true. There was the Battle of Actium, but the methodology at Actium is what I believe could inspire her to try a similar attempt from where she is at in Egypt, which is Alexandria. This is where the next battle is going to be. So how is she going to conduct that battle? My belief is it's a version of Actium, so I call it Actium 2. Now let's look at the map. So what she tried to do was drag her ships overland. And it didn't go well because after she brought a few up there, they got burned up. So her next choice was, how else is she going to get out? I talked about her trying to build ships on the Red Sea and how unlikely she had enough time to build all those ships. But the one thing she could do was build, or the canal was already here, the Ptolemaic Canal that went from this location here, Bubastis, to the Bitter Lakes, and then down to the Red Sea. And there was in history recorded information about a canal being here, but that over time it had gone into misuse and was silted up. So the one way she had left to get out of Egypt was to get her ships down the Nile and then over here and go out on that canal. She had time to unsilt it. In other words, get her men in there to clean up the canal so that when the Nile inundated, that's when the Nile rose, that the ships could go through. Now, obviously, small boats could go through there anytime, but big ships would get stuck. So you have to have enough water. You need the Nile to inundate. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is that it is entirely possible that she had already been working on the canal prior to any of this happening. Because some people say, well, how did she fix up the canal in a short period of time? Well, we know because she tried to drag her ships across land. Clearly, it wasn't operable at that time. But she may have been working on it, just wasn't finished. So she tried this first because she had no other choice. But then when that failed, she said, okay, let's keep going with the canal and hope we can get it done. And then hope that Nile inundates before Octavian arrives in Egypt. Now, she needed him not to show up until the Nile fully inundated, which would mean don't show up till September, October, please. But that's not what happened. So he did show up earlier. And he showed up about 4 weeks before the Nile inundated. All right. So let me read you a little bit. Oh, and I want to point this out too. One of the reasons that it's believed, at least I believe, that the canal was finished was that about 3 years later, there were like 200 ships running around the Red Sea. Octavian's navy was down here, 200 of them. Now, what the heck? He didn't build 200 ships over here in 3 years. So most likely, yes, it was operable. So he could move a whole bunch of ships down here. So I believe that the canal was there. This was going to be her attempt to leave Egypt. Now, what happened? All right. So our first attempt failed overland. Now the second attempt is going to depend on this this canal being operable and Octavian not showing up. But he did. So let's find out a little bit more about that. And then I'll show you how her plan was going to work. All right. So let me go to when he showed up. Really unfortunate. Cleopatra received the horrible news. Octavian was on his way, even though winter was barely over. Unless he was detained along the way or took ill, he would reach Egypt before the Nile floods. If he arrived before August, her only hope would be that Pelusium, this is a location Pelusium, that her general could hold him off. But what are the chances, against the whole Roman army that's going to hold? Very unlikely. But then maybe there could be a siege, and maybe he will be held off another few weeks, and the floods would come, the inundation, and she'd still have a chance. Not so likely if he arrived too soon, though. All right. Now you could think she could have her ships sitting on the Nile right here, ready to go. But the fact simply is, if he got there early and came down the Nile, she'd be wiped out. Likewise, it's not like she could come around here to Pelusium and sit there, because if she's sitting there, same thing. She's going to lose out up here. So the likelihood is she's going to hope she doesn't hear about him getting anywhere near here. And what she will do is take her ships down here and up here. That takes about 5 days. Here's Alexandria. This is one of the mouths of the Nile. The other mouth of the Nile is over here. And this crap in between, if you're wondering why people wouldn't just go straight across, it's a whole bunch of swampy crap and little roads and all. It's a mess. You really can't take it. Even Octavian, if he gets here, he's not going to cross straight over with his army and his fleet. It's a big fat mess. So not happening. So he is going to come down here and go up here. That would take him about 4 weeks. Why? Because he's got an army marching the 250 miles. Cleopatra is not bringing an army. She's just bringing her ships. So that'll take about 5 days to get to here. So if the Nile floods and the inundation hits, she just gets her ships up here and she's out, as long as Octavian isn't there, unfortunately. So what we have here from Plutarch, which this probably is legitimate. Accordingly, the war was suspended for the time being. I don't know what he's talking about there. Oh, yeah. When the winter was over, Caesar again marched against his enemy through Syria and his generals through Libya. So they were coming. He had some other people, another group coming this direction. When Pelusium was taken, there was a rumor that the Egyptian general, had given it up, and not without the consent of Cleopatra. What? But Cleopatra allowed Antony to put to death the wife and children of that general. But this is Plutarch telling nonsense again. Basically, Octavian, the new Caesar, is here. Now he's there, and the Nile has not yet inundated. So there we have a problem. All right. What could she do? And I call this plan, the next plan, this is Actium 2. All right. How could she get out when you have the situation where Octavian is coming along? All right. Let me show you how this would work. So Octavian is here. All right. Now, she needs to, she's in Alexandria. She needs to get, now, this is the big part where they have what's called Rosetta here. You can see the large part of the Nile coming down. Theoretically, she'd have to sail out of there up to here. It's not going to take her very long. But there's also this entrance here. I just don't know if it's deep enough. So, who would know? It's 2,000 years back. But she would have to get out of here and then come down. All right. How does she get out of Alexandria? This is the big problem. We have Octavian. He is coming this way. She cannot come down the Nile until he gets all the way to Alexandria, comes out and puts his ships out here. And which is what he's going to do. Because remember, they're going to have a battle there. So the Roman fleet, let's take a look here. So essentially, you're going to have the if you're here in Alexandria, right at the shores of Alexandria, you're going to have the Roman fleet. All right, and then out in the waters, this is Octavian coming around. Out in the waters is going to be the Octavian's fleet. When I say Roman fleet, Antony's fleet here, Octavian's fleet out there. Now they're trapping the navy of Antony and Cleopatra. So they know at some point they're going to come at each other, right? They're going to have to come out from the shores, the Antony's fleet, and they're going to meet the fleet of Octavian, and there's going to be a fight, just like what happened at Actium. Now, let's look at what happened at Actium. The idea here was everybody knew what was going to happen. Octavian knew that Antony and Cleopatra were going to put a fight up, and then when the fights got going and the ships were spread out, Cleopatra would zip through here, and Antony would zip through here, through the middle of the lines, and shoot back to Alexandria. The difference in Actium 2 would be simply this. She's not going to go through the lines because she doesn't need to get out into this part. Well, she could get out into this part of the Mediterranean. Theoretically, she could do this and then turn and go toward Rosetta. So theoretically, yes, she could break through the lines and she could go around here to Rosetta. Or the other option is if they get far enough out, she can go behind the lines, which will be easier. So they're engaged in battle. And after they pull out, her ships just slide along the shore and go toward Rosetta. Now, can she make it there in time? All right. So if Octavian's fleet is out here and is engaged with Antony's fleet, and she goes behind the lines and goes out to Rosetta, would they see her go? Possibly. Would they chase her? Possibly. But on the other hand, maybe she would get a head start. That is all she needs, is a head start. Now, as she's up here, as she's coming down the Nile, she's got to go 5 days. If Octavian sends some of his fleet after her, her ships in the back of as they're coming down here, let's say she's got them lined up. I don't know how many she would have at that point in time. Let's say she's got 20. Let's say she's got 30, whatever she's got. Whoever is in the back can fight the Octavian's people. Meanwhile, that would slow Octavian down, and the ships in the front would keep going. So they had a chance at that point, if they could get far enough ahead, to then get to Bubastis and out. And that would get Cleopatra out of Egypt and over to India to bide her time. Now you ask, well, what about poor Antony? What's happening to him? Well, I guess he's a sacrificial lamb there, because clearly he's not with her in this instance. So who would be with Cleopatra? His children. That's who'd be with Cleopatra. So if nothing else, his wife would be saved and his children would be saved. He probably knew at that point he was a done duck, you know what I'm saying? So not going to go well for him. However, she had this chance. Now, there's a kind of a funny story that is told, and let me read it. And this is, of course, in Netflix documentary, which just makes me laugh because it's so stupid. Remember the part where she was like begging Octavian, like, "Oh, please let me live," and and he said, "Well, if you kill off Antony, I'll let you live." And they're sending these little messages back and forth, and Cleopatra is like, "Please this and please that." Cleopatra's not a moron. She knows no matter what she says to him and no matter what he says to her, when Octavian arrives, she's going to be under his control. So he doesn't have to keep any of his promises anyway. She's not a moron. So people who think that, oh, she was bargaining with him and begging him, and that, oh, come on now. She's not going to be doing that. And this will play a part later too, because there's a story later which also is ridiculous, based on the same issue, that she would be begging Octavian for anything. But rather than beg, here's another version of this story that's told by, of course, our favorite Plutarch. So instead of begging for his mercy, well, she's doing that, but she also sends this other message. He says, this is what Plutarch says: she had a tomb and monument built surpassingly lofty and beautiful. Okay, now, first of all, we're going to get into this later, the issue of tomb or monument. And this is very, very important, because the story always goes that Cleopatra hid in a tomb and blocked herself in a tomb with her handmaidens, and that's where she ended up dying. And in our next part, part 7, the whole thing about the death of Antony, or what I call the murder of Antony, and Antony coming to her at her tomb. I'm going to explain the tomb and monument situation fully next time, but he's saying here she's building a tomb and a monument. Well, she may well be, but the story goes on about this. And she had erected this near the temple of Isis. And this, by the way, my belief is the Caesareum is the temple she was building, and that was right on the wharfs, essentially right near where her ships would be sitting on the dock, so that she would be ready to get onto the ships and take off. But anyway, he says, collected there in her theoretical temple, whatever she had erected near the temple of Isis, the tomb and monument together, I guess, the most valuable of royal treasures: gold, silver, emeralds, pearls, ebony, ivory, and cinnamon. And besides all this, she put in there great quantities of torchwood and tow. I think it's tow, T-O-W. I don't know, maybe it's called tow. I don't even know what it is. I think something to burn. So that Caesar, which would be Octavian, was anxious about the reason, and fearing lest the woman might become desperate and burn up and destroy this wealth, kept sending on to her vague hopes of kindly treatment from him, at the same time that he advanced with his army against the city. So the claim is that, and let me show you the picture. Okay, so in the Netflix documentary, she's actually in her tomb, okay, because they're going with a tomb, not any monument, a tomb. And she's in this tomb, and she's put all this crap in her tomb. Now, mind you, tombs aren't very big. They usually just have the body of the person in the tomb, like it's a grave, and they're usually underground. Actually, almost all of them are underground. As a matter of fact, this I think is in the Valley of the Kings. I think that's where I was when I did this. And you walk down into the ground, way down to the darkness. And the only reason it's light down there is because I got lights in there, electrical lights. And then you're in a room. It's like a room. Okay. So in the Netflix documentary, she's got a few assorted items, which don't look all that great. But anyway, it's supposed to be all her treasures. I'm like, Looks like like a souvenir shop here. But anyway, she's in there with the two handmaidens, and she's like, "We're going to light this up. We're going to burn this. I will burn this place down before I allow Octavian to have these things." Well, first of all, even if she's dead and he gets the treasures, so what? He's going to be essentially the emperor. He's going to be the ruler of Egypt. If he's got the treasures, he can help the people of Egypt, and he can pay off the soldiers and all the other things. He can stabilize things if he has the money. She has no good reason to prevent him from getting those. So that's all nonsense. But they're down there, and they got all this stuff in there. They're going to burn it up. I'm like, you're in a hermetically sealed tomb, hermetically sealed. Where's all the oxygen for the big fat fire? I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to say, first of all, there's no room to put all the firewood in the tomb. So how are you going to burn anything up anyway? And this is a nonsensical story, absolutely nonsensical story. Now, if it were in a temple, and the temple had, just areas that were open, and I'll explain this in the next show, big open areas, well, this, you could build a fire there and put things in the fire and burn stuff up. Yes. But, I mean, the whole thing is silly. And so the concept here is that she's telling this to Octavian. For what purpose? Let's see. So he can hurry to Alexandria and get there before the Nile finishes inundating? First of all, he can't really hurry. He's on the way. He's going to get there eventually. So he sends something back to her saying, okay, if you don't burn the treasures up, I'll be nice to you. Again, is she going to believe Octavian if he says that to her? It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Sometimes I have to shake my head because I can't believe that this story has just been passed down over and over and over again. I'm like, do you ever stop to think how dumb that is? She's not a dumb person. She knows it's not going to mean anything. Now, is there a purpose for her if she actually sent these letters to Octavian, is there any purpose? I will say there is one purpose. So the letter could be true. What would it be for? Could be for the purpose of getting Octavian to think she was huddling in Alexandria, knowing she's doomed, and she's saying these things because she's lost her mind and she's desperate. So she's staying in Alexandria with no plan in mind. The idea being essentially that he's not thinking she's got a continued plan to escape Egypt, or has any plan to escape Egypt. So therefore he would be unwary of what she might be doing. So if when they got down to the old docks here, and the battles are about to begin, he's not thinking he needs to set a whole bunch of people here to block her from going down the Nile, because he may not know that the canal is functionable. He has no word that she's trying to escape Egypt. And as far as he knows, she's in Alexandria and stuck there. So his focus is on capturing Alexandria and capturing Antony and Cleopatra and putting them to death, essentially. His focus won't be on this, so that if they go to battle, she has one surprise chance that the focus is not on her and her ships that are at the ready at the temple. So she has that one chance to slip out and go up here to the Nile and go down and get out of Egypt. That makes sense. Now, did it happen? Now, bad luck again. Essentially, I'll be getting into this in the next part about what happened with Antony. But things did not go well. All right? The battle never happened. All right? The battle never happened. And when the battle didn't happen, then all was lost. She could not escape because she couldn't move her ships. Because once there was nothing happening out there, there was no escape for her. So join me in part 7, and I will talk about why the battle didn't happen, why Antony was stabbed, not by maybe by his own sword, but not by his own hand. In my opinion, he was stabbed by somebody else, and I'll tell you why. And then the whole crazy story, the craziest story of all, about how Anthony was brought to the tomb and how he died in her arms. This is about the dumbest. This even gets dumber than dumb. Okay. And so definitely join me for part 7. You're going to be, this one's just laughable. So I look forward to seeing you then. And if you're new to my channel, please do like and subscribe and watch the whole series, all 10 parts of it. And I'll see you next time. Bye.